I thought genuinely our attitude was much better today. We were fighting, we were giving everything. We weren't perfect in our performance, but our spirit was there. And our spirit's been there since I've been here, I think, bar 2 games. And it has to be there in every game. So we spoke honestly after the Arsenal game. As I say, our performance probably, there was a hangover. I did feel there was a bit of a hangover, whether that be a little dent in our confidence, but hopefully that will be back after this game.
So there we go. Relief, how much was that the overwhelming emotion, not just for Eddie Howe, for the Newcastle players and those Newcastle fans who made that trip?
Yeah, they needed to bounce back, didn't they, from that defeat to Arsenal. Really heavy defeat at the weekend. They failed to beat Bournemouth at home in the game before that. And so if it had been 3 games without a win, going out of the Cup against a team that are 16th in the Championship, that would have been really poor for Newcastle. And again, I think there might have been started to be a few questions over Eddie Howe. So it's a big relief, but I'd say it's still a little bit of a concern that they needed penalties to beat Blackburn, who, as I say, 16th in the Championship, bottom half. They shouldn't really need to go to penalties, I wouldn't have thought.
But sometimes, if we're looking for positives, if we're half full rather than half empty, these little things, just one penalty shootout can turn your season for you. Is that the hope that Eddie Howe will have?
Absolutely. I think what this result will bring is confidence. You know, I was at the game they played against Arsenal on Saturday, and despite having a very strong team, they had Alexander Isak back, they were really lacking in that confidence in terms of playing out the back, trying to get those connections up front. And, you know, they've got a big run of games coming up. They've got the teams either side of them in the Premier League table, Wolves and Chelsea. And then after the international break, they've got a run of winnable games, Palace, West Ham, Everton and Fulham. So that's it's a real boost for Eddie Howe. But the FA Cup is massive for him. It's really important. If Newcastle finish outside the top 4, which I think is a very real possibility at this moment, and they don't win a trophy, what will the Saudi ownership decide, especially when you look at the calibre of managers that are around at the moment, the likes of Thomas Tuchel, Xavi will be a candidate as well. So the fact that this Newcastle's search for a trophy is still going on is another side of it as well. And I think if they get a good draw and they move to Wembley, then who knows, maybe Howe does have a sort of a shining light available.
Yeah, I mean, last season they finished in the top 4 and they got to a cup final. The sense was, I think, amongst the optimists there, that this is the new era, every year is going to be like this. This is most probably realism now rather than optimism. But if we're trying to be slightly optimistic, yes, they are in 10th, but 2 points off a possible European spot. So it's not too far. It's a little bit further to Manchester United in 6th and a lot further to Aston Villa in 4th. But it is doable. So what is success and what does not reaching that success, what are the consequences of that?
I think success, I think the top 4 is gone. I don't think they're going to get into the top 4, like you say. I think they've got to get into Europe. It's a little bit similar to Chelsea, I think, that we're probably going to talk about later. I think they have to get into Europe. And so they're probably hoping that a team in the top 4 wins the FA Cup and that the Premier League gets a 5th Champions League place, and then those Europa League and Conference League places drop down, and so you could only need to finish 7th or 8th to get into Europe. So Newcastle are probably hoping that happens. I think they need to have a positive end to the season. A cup run in the FA Cup would be great. They've not reached the final of the FA Cup since 1999. They've not got a great record at all in the FA Cup over recent seasons. So that would really help Eddie Howe. I think he's in a similar position perhaps to someone like Erik ten Hag or Maurizio Pochettino, where I think there's going to be a review at the end of the season, and I wouldn't be surprised if the owners kind of looked at it if they have a poor end to the season and think, like Sam said, with the managers that are going to be on the market, is he really the best person to kind of take us forward, given that they've taken a step back this year? They've been unfortunate with injuries and, you know, they've had to adapt to European football and they've struggled a little bit, but we know that Eddie Howe wasn't the first choice when they appointed him. They wanted Unai Emery, and Eddie Howe did a great job last season, tailed off a little bit this year, so I think he does need a positive end to the season just to kind of secure his position. Yeah,
well, while one penalty shootout might turn it in your favour, that decision at the end of that game in the Parc des Princes against PSG looked like it turned it the wrong way, and such are the small factors here, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I think the key thing for Eddie Howe and his future is that he has to tell the Newcastle board at the end of the season, this team is evolving. I don't think Newcastle have evolved from last season, even though last season we all said they probably overachieved by getting Champions League football. I mean, last season Newcastle were famed for having that rock-solid defence, but at the moment they're on a run of one clean sheet in 8 games. And also they had the attack has sort of stayed similar to last season, but Isak and Wilson have been injured. It's been difficult for Howe. He's had these sort of FFP problems hanging over the club, so he hasn't been able to strengthen in the same way that they liked. But you know, you want him to do well. You always want to see English managers do well at the top clubs. But it is going to be a major talking point for Newcastle over the summer, whether they stick or twist, as Joe said.